What's up, YouTube? Check this thing out. We're finally done with it. I'll do a little bit of commentary on sort of the finished product, and then we'll start right from scratch and we'll talk about how we did it. Real quick, what is this thing? You go on to Amazon, type in welding practice, and you get all these options for dice and laser cut things. And then you see this crazy wolf thing here, and you click on it, buy it, Prime. So in my area, this thing shows up next day. Boom, it's on your door, you get it unboxed, you get it all laid out. Then after a few hours of trying to figure out the instructions, you start bending the pieces and tacking them together. And pretty soon you got yourself something that looks like a wolf. And here it is once again. I think it turned out pretty well. I really love how the facets catch the light, especially with the rainbows or the heat affected zones, grabbing specific colors and tossing the rest. I think it really makes a statement when you walk in. And I don't know this for sure, but I couldn't find any pictures of it assembled, any pictures of it done, tacked together, nothing. Everything online is all just CAD drawings and renderings. And so I would be ventured to say that this is one of the first ever that was fully completed. So no matter how critical I get about my welds, they're the only ones. So I'm happy with it for sure. Once I got my process somewhat established to where the welds looked somewhat tolerable, really what I was trying to focus on was consistency. You notice with the heat affected zones, the rainbows aren't really all over the place. It's sort of what I was striving for is a nice continuous line and even controlled heat going into it. And then second, obviously trying to keep good looking beads. So one interesting thing is this is so thin, it's like 30 thousandths or something like that, I forget, but you know, I'm only running 25 amps or something, so plus or minus an amp is a lot. It's like 3%. And finally, no matter how much you really try, the welds aren't going to be that great because there's no way to back purge it. And then here I'm zooming in on where the nose looks like it's crushed in. You know what that's from is warpage from heat. This is stainless, so you really kind of got to pick away at the welds. I mean, it was a lot of work. All right, so backing up back from scratch. Before you buy this thing, pay attention. There's a lot of welding practice things on here, but look at the complexity of them all compared to this thing. I mean, that should have been a red flag right there. Like the number of facets, however you want to look at it, this thing is super, super complicated. And one consolation is they say that they sell over 100 a month or in the last month, which I kind of think is bullshit. I'm going to call them out on that. So looking at some of the other stuff, here it says 201 stainless steel. Again, all CAD renderings. There are no pictures of this thing whatsoever. Pretty generic. But yeah, there it is, 0.9 millimeters, whatever that is in imperial or gauge. And then you look at the reviews. I'm new to welding, and then with the 5-star review, right? I used magnetic squares to hold it in place and was able to get a bead. And it welds up nicely. Like, again, bullshit, it's stainless. You didn't stick anything to a magnet. Some of the other ones are kind of useful. No inclination that they actually finished it, but you know, some of them are pretty critical, somewhat helpful in hindsight. No instructions, metal's cheap, fused at 20 amps like I said, right? And then they ran it at 30. So you need to have a machine that can control an arc to that low of an amperage. And then here, I'm going to post some pictures of it just laid out. Like you didn't like put it together at all, you know what I mean? Again, 5-star review, right? So, and I don't mean to say all this to deter people. I just mean that whoever runs this e-store is really good at the Amazon algorithm, and it's kind of deceiving in my opinion. They should be a little more upfront. So anyway, let's get to it. Let's go back in time to when I started this whole project, right from when this thing showed up. we have an aluminum welding project coming up. We're going to put a intercooler in that Delica. It's in some of the previous episodes, so I figure let's get set up on welding. And since I've never welded aluminum before, I kind of want to get into the flow and work up to it a little bit before I just stab into welding thin aluminum intercooler tubing. Also thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of talk about what kind of equipment I have, what are some of the techniques that I use, what's my setup look like, and as a forewarning, it's nothing fancy. So you can see I don't have a tungsten grinder. In fact, I don't really even like them. I use like these cheap bench grinders. Like in terms of a fan, I just have a tiny little fan blowing the smoke away from my face. And we'll talk about why. But anyway, talk a little bit about the setup and then keep it real. This is how it goes. So looking at this thing, this is how it came in a box, source, unpacking, and then a box within a box. And then from there, this whole thing folds out like some kind of book. Here's the instructions. Show that on the screen, and then all that just to ship this tiny little pack of metal here. Pull it all apart. But as you can see, there's burn marks in it from where the laser sputtered. It is stainless steel, so this to me should be like chrome. Let's get this open and take a closer look at it. Alright, so here's some of the pieces. It's pretty thin, and actually the underside obviously is cleaner than the top side. There's oil on it. I guess according to the instructions there's 14 pieces and they all need to be bent. There's two of the same, so you know, it's symmetric. Like here, for example, if it focuses on this, but you could see it's kind of all burned from the laser, but one side's clean. So what I'm hoping is that we could clean up this side and use this as the outside. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that for the symmetric ones, but maybe it'll just come. It's coming off. So you could feel the texture. So it's definitely like some swarf or whatever, but let's see if we can clean them up with a sander or DA and then get them polished. Yep, so now we know why there's no pictures of this thing. It's like some origami dude designed this on the computer. Like, how are you gonna know what angle to bend all this stuff? They tell you kind of which way to bend it, which is cool. But I mean, I'm looking at this. This isn't a welding project. This is one of those like 3D puzzle things. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think we need to spend some time cleaning this stuff up just so that it doesn't look like dull stainless. I kind of want it to look like metal and polished. So get on that. So with a couple minutes of work, it's definitely brightening up. It's very flimsy because it's where the bends are. They left little tabs and stuff, and the rouge is going to get in there and really kind of mess with the weld, but I don't know. We'll see. So I ran all the pieces through the polisher as much as I cared to. Pretty terrifying watching them grab the buffer and all that. So some of them are more polished than others. I try to pick the most prominent ones and spend most time on. But hopefully the focus will be on the welds and not necessarily the facets. So next thing, I guess we'll just start trying to bend it together as like a origami piece and see what we can get. Maybe we'll have to start tacking first. I don't know. We'll see what happens. You can see what I mean about this just taking forever. Trying to figure out the instructions, picking your way through it. Here I'm grabbing the sheet metal pliers for like ducting and things, because even though it's thin, some of the longer ones I didn't really want to twist it, and why struggle? So these make it really easy. And then here I'm getting up to get a Sharpie to start marking the edges, because it's really actually hard to keep track of them all. And I think I got them all bent, or at least some of them, so let's start tacking. You can really see I'm struggling here. I'm making headway and then ripping it back off, trying to just figure out how this is supposed to work. And you can even see I'm breaking some of the tabs to try and make it easier on myself as I figure it out. Alright, so this thing's starting to take shape. And the first thing I'm noticing is how the hell are you going to weld this? These trenches or these angles are so sharp and deep. Like this is a number 8 cup, and I mean, like, let me line it up for the camera, but dude, what are you going to do? Like stick your tungsten out an inch? And so it'll be really interesting, and you're never going to be able to do a really good job of kind of welding all these things here. So I mean, I'll get it tacked, but I'm kind of thinking that we need to add some welds on the inside just to give it some strength and body. But I don't know. Yeah, we'll keep going here. Alright YouTube, it's another day and another dollar spent, but this thing is together. There is 2 pieces missing, but I don't really care. This was a bitch. Wrestled with it for a while. I got frustrated because the camera wasn't working. It wasn't recording continuously, but nevertheless, you just got to kind of grind through it and get it done. So I went online. I didn't think this was going to work. I mean, by the time all these angles and the pieces kept snapping off, and the instructions are really pretty thin, I didn't think we were going to be able to do it, but here it is. Looks pretty cool. It's amazing how strong this thing is. So let me go through some of the tools and techniques that I use to kind of get to this point here. You're gonna absolutely need an auto hood. It's just so hard to hold these pieces together at some angle, so people online are saying, oh, I used a magnet. Like, no you didn't. First of all, it's stainless, and then what angle are you going to put it at? So that's a crock of shit. That's how you know those reviews are fake. 2, there's no pictures of this thing done online, so that tells me that nobody's done it. So you're precariously trying to hold this together with your hands or whatever, and then, you know, fusion weld it with the TIG. Will go through the settings, but when you go to snap the hood down, I mean, it's just not gonna work. So you have to kind of be super still while you're fusion welding this stuff. Super thin. My preference is to have one of these welding hats underneath, because this thing took me a few hours to put together. It's unbelievable. This is so sharp. These are so sharp, you know, and they say that in the instructions. Here's like a thing from a rag, I don't know, but this is so sharp, and you're fiddling with it and you're looking close, like it's really tempting to take these off, but my arms are all cut up and burned from holding too close to the where I was tacking. Highly, highly, highly recommend these. These are like these are for ducting and, you know, HVAC stuff, but it really helped to like get it on there as much as you can, as close to the, you know, as close to the bend as possible, to really distribute that. I think that if you were to try and grab this and it was really, say like the angle comes to a thing, you can't get your fingers on that enough, and if you just push here, it sort of bends these more than here. So sheet metal pliers really help to kind of spread the load. A tiny little pick, screwdriver pick here, to really, like, when they're almost lined up and you kind of just got to get in there and pull it out to get it flush, right? Something like that. Another pick that you can get in there and grab and pull. These are my welding pliers, and they're really for like getting in, pulling your MIG wire out, cutting it, or for me, getting the tungsten out of the holder. But I really like these funny looking pliers because you can kind of reach in and around and get into places where you couldn't with straight pliers. So, and they still work as straight pliers. It's just a better sort of ergonomics on these. Towards the end, like I said, this thing is so strong, so you really kind of like have to have something strong and beat that in just to kind of really like get this stuff to line up. And so as we talked about, we kind of like went from here, I went around the backside to just leverage those angles, those set angles, and then sort of like came up and around with the critical pieces that you're going to do, and then filled in from the sides on there. So here's the piece that is missing, and again, you know, I could weld that in, but it's not even close. And as you could see here, that gap. So what I ended up having to do was, on the last pieces, like I think it was this one here, it was so far out, but I just hit it with the flap disc and, you know, made it look good. So anyway, we'll kind of go over how I did it. Of course, a marker to write the pieces down. The TIG setup that I used, again, this is sort of exactly how I left it. It's nothing fancy. So first of all, this is kind of like one of those China machines. It's a TIG 200. And one of the nice things about this is it's AC/DC. So when we start getting into aluminum, which is why I started this project, just to kind of brush it out, I can do it. In terms of settings, so I measured the thickness of the material and it was about 30 thousandths thick. So I'm running 30 amps, but with the pedal. So I'm really tacking at probably about 10, and then maybe like a quick burst up to 30. Wire, I have stainless wire. What is this? 3/16 from another project, and then the diameter is 0.45. So it's actually really thin, which helps sort of like give you a lot of control of how much to put on. normal tungsten, I'm not good enough to know any different. A number 8 cup keeps everything. You can kind of get in and you can bring the tungsten out. I don't use gas lenses. I was kind of told, oh, do all your learning on just normal stuff. So there's nothing fancy here. And then of course I have dedicated wire brushes just for stainless and all sorts of wire and material in here, but didn't really use any of it. So the tungsten grinder, again, I've used the little handheld Dremel looking ones. I don't really like them because if you get a ball on there, you got to come to the grinder anyway. So I use this tiny little Harbor Freight, what is this, polisher grinder. This is off, but I use these wheels and spin the tungsten in there, and everybody you see everybody with the drill. I don't do that. I just come in from the side, and again, it's not perfect, but you know what, it works for me. So that's the TIG setup. It's kind of simple. 100% argon, right? And then cubic feet per minute is double the cup. So if this is a number 8 cup, then I'm using about 16 cubic feet per minute in argon. And so far this thing, I'm happy that I spent time polishing the surfaces prior, because when you look at sort of how the original was, it's pretty dingy and dirty. There's hundreds of tacks everywhere, and again, I'm fusion tacking, so let me see if I can focus on some of this, but you can tell like I'm burning through in places, that's why it's welding practice. Like here's the kind of the worst of it, because this sort of node right here is one of those places where you're holding a piece, you're bending it. You can see this gap is terrible. And so really was losing patience at this point too, and probably throwing too much heat. But again, I'm happy that I spent time polishing it. You can really sort of tell. And so I guess the next step here is to go through and fill all of the sort of burn and gaps, and then maybe spend a little bit of time with the flap wheel to clean it all up, and to maybe sand and repolish some of the really big blemishes, like on the nose where it's like a critical piece and there's this giant sort of brown contaminated thing. It's day, I don't even know what day it is, but I'll show you where we are or what changes we've made so far. Here is a old engine stand. This is actually the fixture I made for when I was making the G-Wagon bumpers. And then just as a little simple welding project, we cut it in these 2 places here and let people learn how to TIG. It was pretty cool to do that. And then so now we don't have to fumble around with it on the table. It can spin around and we can get to all these welds here. Nice. Then on the back there's this ground strap bolted to it, and so it's just, you're not fighting the clamp. Yeah, so far the strategy has been, once it was all kind of put together, now every single joint needs to be welded, because if you, like, I think we did a couple of welds already, like over here, if you start running it, what happens is the corners peel up, right? So my strategy has just been to do every single corner and then get a tack on probably every 25 millimeters or an inch or so that it doesn't warp the flats. And here we got, just to kind of play around and see, hopefully in an area where it's not really super visible, but just try and get a feel for running beads and how much it pulls. So here we're trying to keep it cool and it's real blobby, thinking we can hit it with the grinder, but you can't do that with the inside facets. So we're just playing with heat settings and stuff like that, or like this one here. Let me see if I can get the camera to focus on that particular weld, but this one here is just running a constant, no pedal, no nothing, just kind of a constant burn on it. And then whereas some of these are traditional, sort of more dimey looking stuff. But you can't just run them, because you can hear it as that weld cools. It just starts breaking tacks. It just starts breaking tacks and, you know, ripping itself apart. So that's why everything's got to be tacked. And anywhere where you got to throw a lot of heat, like here, for example, where it's this sort of, we're kind of in the, away from the light here, where like anytime you got to throw a lot of heat, like here, for example, to fill this gap, like this is going to just pull insanely. So I mean, this thing has to be kind of rigidly put together first. So I'm doing, you know, like I said, all the corners, and then where it makes sense to, you know, I'll get a little antsy and burn it just to kind of do it, but it's probably not the best. We're almost done tacking this thing together. We're almost done tacking this thing together and getting all the corners done. And then, you know, then we'll start filling gaps and all that, you know, fill all of our burn holes from tacking this thing together and just go after it. So changes to the TIG setup. I went down to a 3/32 tungsten, I think. And again, everybody's kind of like, whoa, why don't you use gas lens? Okay, I'm with you there. But when you watch the trophy truck people do it, they have this big giant cup and they're just throwing gas. Like they must have a argon doer outside the building, because you're gonna throw a bottle like immediately with that thing. And you need very small, in my opinion, you want a small cup to kind of try and get into some of these angles. I mean, it's, let me get it to focus here. Trying to do all this by myself. To get into all these angles and get good gas coverage. Because again, there's no way to purge, right? Like there's a big giant open hole in the back. And some of these things here by design are not, there's no plate there. So you can't really purge that thing. And so to me, a smaller cup with a higher gas flow, and it could be cleaner, but what, you know, whatever, I don't know, just little project. So that's the update so far on progress. It's looking good, so keep burning in and we'll check back. Super glad I polished it, because the original material really looks like shit. So, and that's right around the time, and you could hear it in my voice, where I'm getting aggravated, I'm getting complacent, and right then, this finger went right into that grinder. I was sitting on the edge of that table with the grinder next to me, and when I went to reach down, there's sort of like this movement where I catch the knob with my finger and then start spinning the tungsten, but lost focus and looked away, and then the wheel caught my glove and pulled my finger in, and immediately made a fist. Blood just started shooting all over the floor, made a fist, and then that was really the end of it. But anyway, between the camera not filming right, whether it's the UV light from the arc controlling the camera through like the IR thing or whatever, or the battery going dead, and this dang project taking so long, I was just over it. You could hear it in my voice. I was absolutely over it. We tabled it for a few, actually probably 2 weeks, because I had stitches in my finger and I really couldn't weld, and it wasn't right. So we kind of just pushed it in the corner, and then that was it. But anyway, nevertheless, it almost cost me my finger, so that thing was gonna get finished. And I'm happy we did, because here's the Delica sort of on the stands. Let's check this thing out here. We got, you can see it, here's some aluminum intercooler piping going in as we speak. Back in the front room, let's get a look at some of these welds. Here's the wolf. Oh, let's get it in the shot. Oh, sick, bro. So I'm happy we did it. All that work with getting familiar with the machine, playing around with tungsten settings. I mean, that's thin aluminum tubing to a flange, welded inside and out, AC. I don't think it would have came out as nice if we didn't spend the time on this. So again, here's some interconnects. Easy. But anyway, from there, you just start running beads, and I don't think there's really anything past this point in the project that could really help you, because it's so dependent on your machine, your posture, your flow, your everything. But it is possible. It's done. We love it. It's going to take a long time. It costs a lot to do this. My finger's still numb, probably a month later, but nevertheless, keep working at it, because there's bigger and better projects down the line. And with that, we'll take one more look at this thing, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. We're going to post about a video a month on what's going on with the shop and some of the projects as we finish them or hit a certain milestone. So keep an eye out for that. Of course, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. But anyway, with that, I'm going to leave you with it. We'll see you next time. Do something awesome. It's worth it. It'll pay off.